Storybook title, Kate's Domination Part 1. Written and copyright by A.A. Castor. Narrated by Hazel. Welcome everyone to A.A. Castor Book Club. Today's story is Kate's Domination. Prepare yourselves for a provocative journey into the mind of a woman who finds power and pleasure in absolute control. This tale delves into the intense dynamics between a young woman and the men who willingly submit to her, exploring the boundaries of dominance, submission, and the darker aspects of human desire. Be ready for a narrative that challenges the conventional, pushing the limits of power and obedience in a way that is both captivating and unsettling. Scene 1: The Hidden Dom. Kate, a 24-year-old woman with an alluringly youthful and innocent appearance, walked through life wearing a mask. On the outside, she seemed like a small, innocent girl with no hint of the dark desires she kept hidden. But beneath her innocent facade lay a love for BDSM and a fetish for dominating unattractive, overweight men. These men, whose society often overlooked, became her willing subjects, submitting to her every whim and desire. Kate enjoyed the power she wielded over them, the control she had, and the satisfaction it brought her. Despite her hidden desires, Kate was careful to keep her private life a secret. She enjoyed the thrill of living a double life, knowing that no one suspected the truth about her motives and intentions. Scene 2: The Blind Date. One evening, Kate decided to go on a blind date arranged through an online platform. She was curious about who she might meet. She arrived at a small, cozy cafe downtown and waited, her innocent facade firmly in place. Soon, a 35-year-old man named Johnny walked in. He was unattractive and somewhat shy, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Johnny approached Kate nervously. "Hi, I'm Johnny," he introduced himself awkwardly. "Hi, Johnny, I'm Kate," she replied with a warm, disarming smile. They settled into their seats and began to talk. The conversation flowed surprisingly well, and Johnny found himself opening up to Kate in a way he hadn't with anyone else. "So, Johnny, what do you enjoy doing in your free time?" Kate asked, her eyes fixed on his. "Well, I like reading, mostly mystery novels, and I also enjoy cooking. It's kind of a hobby of mine," Johnny replied, his face lighting up as he spoke about his passions. "That sounds wonderful. I love a good mystery myself. Maybe you could cook for me sometime?" Kate suggested, her smile widening. Johnny blushed, feeling a rush of excitement. "I'd love to. How about you, Kate? What are your interests?" Kate's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief. "Oh, I have quite a few interests, Johnny. Maybe I'll show you someday." As the evening progressed, Johnny couldn't shake the feeling of arousal growing inside him. He was drawn to Kate in a way he couldn't explain. When she suggested they go back to his place, he eagerly agreed, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Scene 3: The Trap. Johnny's apartment was small and modest, reflecting his simple lifestyle. He offered Kate a drink, trying to hide his excitement and nervousness. They settled on the couch, and the conversation continued, though the atmosphere was now charged with a different kind of energy. "So, do you live alone, Johnny?" Kate asked, her eyes scanning the room. "Yeah, it's just me here," Johnny replied, trying to sound casual. "That must be nice, quiet, and peaceful," Kate said, taking a sip of her drink. Johnny nodded. "Yeah, it is. I like it." As they continued talking, Kate subtly slipped a sleeping pill into Johnny's drink when he wasn't looking. She watched as he took a sip, her anticipation growing. Within minutes, Johnny's eyelids grew heavy, and he slumped against the couch, fast asleep. Kate moved quickly, her experience evident in the efficiency of her actions. She carefully tied Johnny's wrists and ankles to the bedposts, ensuring he couldn't move. When he finally began to stir, she was ready. Johnny awoke with a start, confusion and fear flooding his senses, as he realized he was restrained. He struggled against the bonds, but they held firm. Kate stood over him, her expression calm and reassuring. "There's nothing to worry about, Johnny," she said softly. "If you're a good boy, everything will be fine." Johnny's fear was quickly overshadowed by a surge of arousal as he gazed at Kate. Her confidence and control over the situation were intoxicating. He nodded, unable to speak, his heart pounding in his chest. Kate leaned down and kissed him passionately, her lips soft and commanding. "See, there's nothing to worry about," she whispered, her breath hot against his ear. Johnny's initial fear melted away, replaced by a deep sense of submission and desire. He felt a wave of horniness wash over him, overwhelming his senses. Kate's dominance was absolute, and he was powerless to resist her. Kate smiled, sensing his submission. "Good boy," she murmured, running her fingers through his hair. "Now let's have some fun." Johnny agreed willingly, his mind clouded with desire. Kate's voice took on a commanding tone as she laid out the rules. "I don't like guys who don't obey me. I don't like guys who disobey me," she said firmly. "There's no safe word. You enjoy it or not, it's not my concern. Do you agree?" Johnny, his arousal peaking, nodded eagerly. "Yes, I agree." Kate's smile widened. "Good. Now remember, be a good boy and everything will be fine." Kate then stood back, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Let's start, shall we?" Johnny, restrained and unable to move, nodded again, anticipation and arousal coursing through him. Suddenly, Kate's expression changed, becoming more intense. She punched him in the face, not hard enough to cause serious injury, but enough to shock him. Johnny winced in pain and gasped. Kate laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Did that hurt? Get used to it, Johnny. Pain is just part of the enjoyment." Johnny, feeling a mix of pain and arousal, nodded, his breath quickening. "Yes, ma'am." Kate's smile returned, softer now. She kissed him deeply, her tongue exploring his mouth. "Good boy, now let's see how much you can handle." She moved to sit on his face, her weight pressing down on him. "Do you enjoy being my chair, Johnny?" she asked, her voice dripping with dominance. Johnny, muffled beneath her, managed to respond, "Yes, I enjoy it." Kate smirked, pleased with his answer. She reached down and struck his private parts, eliciting a cry of pain from him. "Call me ma'am," she demanded. Johnny, despite the pain, felt a surge of horniness. "Yes, ma'am," he gasped. Kate's laughter filled the room. "Good boy, I remember you belong to me now." Scene 4, The Punishment. Kate's eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and determination as she looked down at Johnny, who was restrained and utterly at her mercy. She reached down and began to play with his private parts, her touch expert and knowing. Johnny, who had never experienced such attention before, felt a wave of intense pleasure wash over him. "Oh, ma'am," Johnny moaned, his body reacting quickly to Kate's ministrations. Within moments, he was already on the brink of finishing. His face flushed with embarrassment as he felt himself climax, unable to control it. Kate's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold disapproval. "Did you just finish without my permission?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," Johnny stammered, his voice shaking. Kate's eyes narrowed, and she acted out her anger with precision. "Did you ask my permission?" she repeated, her tone icy. Johnny shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "No, ma'am, I didn't." "That's right," Kate snapped, her hand curling into a fist. Without warning, she punched Johnny's private parts hard, causing him to cry out in pain. Johnny's tears flowed freely now, his body racked with pain. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he sobbed, the words choking out of him. Kate looked at her hand, now slick with his fluids, and grimaced. "Look at my hand. It's covered in your mess. I hate it." She pressed her hand against Johnny's mouth, forcing him to clean it with his tongue. "Lick it clean and do it properly," she commanded. Johnny, despite his pain, he licked her hand clean, his tears mingling with the fluids as he did so. Kate watched him with a mix of satisfaction and disdain. "Say you're sorry," she ordered, her eyes locked onto his. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Johnny managed to say, his voice muffled and thick with emotion. He struggled to speak through the pain and the humiliation, but he did as he was told. Kate's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Good. Remember, Johnny, you belong to me now, and you will always obey me." Johnny nodded, the reality of his submission sinking in deeper with each passing moment. Scene 5: The Test of Obedience. After their intense session, Kate felt a wave of boredom wash over her. She decided to take a nap, leaving Johnny tied up and helpless. An hour later, she woke up, feeling refreshed and with no intention of freeing Johnny from his restraints. Kate stretched and looked over at Johnny, who was still lying there, bound and vulnerable. "Feeling hungry?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Johnny, despite his discomfort and the lingering pain, was still aroused. "Yes, ma'am, I am very hungry," he replied, his voice trembling with a mix of need and submission. Kate smirked. "I am too." She walked to the kitchen and returned with a plate of food. Sitting down in front of Johnny, she began to eat slowly, savoring each bite while keeping her eyes fixed on him. Johnny's stomach growled loudly, and he couldn't take his eyes off the food. The sight and smell of it were almost too much to bear. "Are you hungry?" Kate asked again, a teasing tone in her voice. "Yes, ma'am, I am very hungry," Johnny replied, his desperation evident. Kate raised an eyebrow and put her foot, still in her shoe, against Johnny's mouth. "Do you like it?" she asked, pressing her shoe into his lips. Johnny hesitated for a moment before replying. "Ma'am, can I have some of the food you're eating?" Kate's tone turned mockingly sweet. "I just gave you my shoe. You should be very grateful." She then kicked his face lightly, just enough to remind him of his place. "Now eat my shoe." Johnny, driven by his intense arousal and submission, began to lick and kiss her shoe, cleaning it with his mouth. The humiliation and the taste of dirt only heightened his sense of submission and horniness. Kate watched him with satisfaction, continuing to eat her meal. "That's right, clean my shoes, Johnny," she commanded, her voice filled with authority. Johnny obeyed, the mix of domination and embarrassment making him even more aroused. He could feel every rough texture of the shoe against his tongue, and he relished the taste of submission. After finishing her meal, Kate looked down at the empty plate and then at Johnny. "I'm finished eating. There's no food left." Johnny's stomach growled again, and he looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Are you still hungry?" Kate asked, her tone laced with false sympathy. "Yes, ma'am, I'm starving," Johnny replied, his voice barely a whisper. Kate's expression darkened with feigned anger. She punched Johnny in the mouth, causing him to wince in pain. "I just fed you earlier. Are you not thankful?" she demanded. Johnny, tears welling up in his eyes from the pain and the humiliation, replied, "I enjoyed it, ma'am." Kate's smile returned, pleased with his response. "Good, I hate it when guys act ungrateful." She paused, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Did you like what I ate?" "Yes, ma'am, I loved what you ate," Johnny replied, his voice filled with earnest submission. "Well," Kate said, a twisted smile on her lips, "you know, I'm a very nice woman. I share what I eat." She leaned in closer and commanded, "Open your mouth." Johnny obeyed, opening his mouth wide. Kate brought her face close to his, her eyes locked onto his with a predatory gaze. With deliberate cruelty, she spit into his mouth, filling it with the remnants of her meal. "Swallow it," she ordered. Johnny, despite the humiliation and the revulsion, did as he was told, swallowing the contents with difficulty. Kate's laughter filled the room, a sound of triumph and dominance. "Good boy," she said, patting his cheek mockingly. "Remember, you belong to me now, and you will always obey me." Johnny nodded, the reality of his submission sinking in deeper with each passing moment. The mix of pain, humiliation, and arousal had left him completely under Kate's control, willing to do anything to please her. Scene 6: The Hike. Kate decided to take Johnny outside for a change of scenery. She thought a hike would be a perfect opportunity to deepen his submission and explore his willingness to obey her. As they walked through the lush forest, the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling created a serene backdrop for their conversation. Kate glanced at Johnny, who walked beside her, slightly behind. "So, Johnny, how have you enjoyed our time together so far?" she asked, her voice casual but with an underlying tone of dominance. Johnny, despite the physical discomfort from their previous encounters, felt a rush of excitement at her question. "I've enjoyed it a lot, ma'am." It's been enlightening. It's my first time being kissed and touched by a woman, he admitted, his voice tinged with a mix of embarrassment and arousal. Kate smiled, pleased with his response. That's good to hear. Remember, everything will be fine as long as you always obey me, she replied, her eyes glinting with control. Yes, ma'am, I understand, Johnny said, his voice full of submission. He felt a strong desire to please her, to show his devotion and obedience. As they continued walking, their conversation took a more intimate turn. Johnny opened up about his feelings of submission and adoration towards Kate. I've never felt this way before, ma'am. Being with you, submitting to you, it feels right. I want to do whatever it takes to make you happy, he confessed. Kate listened, her expression thoughtful. It's important that you understand your place, Johnny. Your purpose is to serve and please me. Do you think you can handle that? She asked, testing his resolve. Johnny nodded eagerly. Yes, ma'am. I want to serve you. I want to make you happy. Kate's smile widened, satisfied with his answer. However, she decided to challenge his devotion further. I didn't bring any water for you, Johnny. Are you thirsty? Johnny, already feeling the dryness in his throat, hesitated before responding. Yes, ma'am, I'm a bit thirsty. Kate raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. Johnny took a deep breath, feeling his arousal heighten at the thought of what he was about to say. I can drink your urine, ma'am, he offered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. Kate's eyes sparkled with amusement and approval. That's a good idea, slave. But first you need to worship and beg for it, she commanded, her tone firm. Since you've been so ungrateful, sharing your feelings with me, I need to remind you that I don't care about you or feel anything for you. You're here to serve me, nothing more. Johnny felt a wave of arousal wash over him at her words. The rejection and humiliation only made him more turned on. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for being ungrateful. Please, may I have your urine? I beg you, he pleaded, his voice filled with desperation and submission. Kate looked down at him, her expression one of satisfaction and dominance. Lie on your back and open your mouth, she ordered. Johnny complied immediately, lying down on the forest floor and opening his mouth wide. Kate stood over him, her presence dominating and powerful. She looked down at him with a sense of control and satisfaction, knowing he was completely under her power. As Kate relieved herself, Johnny did his best to drink as much as he could, feeling a strange mix of humiliation, arousal, and devotion. The taste and smell overwhelmed him, but he focused on pleasing Kate, on showing his complete submission to her will. When she finished, Kate looked down at him with a cold, satisfied smile. Good boy, now clean me, she commanded. Johnny obeyed, his tongue cleaning her as best he could. Kate watched him, feeling a deep sense of power and control. She knew that Johnny was hers completely, willing to do anything to please her. Scene 7, the cabin encounter. Kate and Johnny continued their hike through the wild environment, taking in the serene beauty of the woods. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds. It was just the two of them, completely alone in nature, and despite the unconventional nature of their relationship, they enjoyed each other's company. Eventually, they stumbled upon a quaint log cabin nestled among the trees. Deciding it was the perfect place to rest, they made their way inside. The cabin was rustic but cozy, with a small kitchen and a wooden table at the center. Johnny, eager to please Kate, had brought along some good food. They set up a meal, and Kate settled herself comfortably at the table. However, before they began eating, she looked at Johnny with a firm expression. I don't like having a guy next to me at the table, she said. You can stay on the floor naked. Johnny didn't hesitate. He quickly undressed and knelt on the floor beside the table, embracing his role with a sense of contentment and submission. The cool air of the cabin sent shivers down his spine, but he found comfort in his obedience to Kate. As they began their meal, Kate placed a dog bowl on the floor in front of Johnny, filling it with portions of the food. She then used her foot to lift some food from the bowl and held it above Johnny's open mouth. "Open wide," she instructed, a smirk playing on her lips. Johnny opened his mouth eagerly, feeling a rush of happiness and submission as Kate fed him with her foot. The humiliation and degradation only heightened his sense of devotion to her. "Thank you, ma'am," Johnny said after swallowing the food, his voice filled with sincere appreciation. Kate continued to feed Johnny in this manner, each bite reinforcing the power dynamics between them. She reveled in the control she had, watching Johnny's face light up with each morsel of food. "Good boy," she praised, her voice soft but authoritative. "You belong to me and you will always obey." "Yes, ma'am," Johnny replied, his eyes shining with a mixture of happiness and submission. As the meal continued, Johnny felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and arousal. He was happy to have Kate's attention, even in this degrading position. His eyes wandered slightly, and he found himself looking at Kate's underwear, feeling a surge of horniness. Kate noticed Johnny's gaze and her expression changed instantly. She became furious, feeling violated by his unpermitted look. "Did you just look at my underwear without my permission?" she demanded, her voice icy. Johnny's face turned pale and he stammered, "I am sorry, ma'am." Kate's anger was palpable. "Open your legs," she ordered, standing up. Johnny obeyed, his fear and arousal mingling. Kate delivered a swift kick between his legs, causing him to gasp in pain. "Never violate me again," she commanded, her voice filled with authority. "Yes, ma'am," Johnny replied, tears welling up in his eyes from the pain, but still feeling an intense sense of devotion to her. Kate's expression softened slightly, satisfied with his response. "Good. Remember your place, Johnny. You are here to serve and obey me, nothing more." "Yes, ma'am," Johnny repeated, his voice trembling but sincere. They continued their evening, the dynamic between them reaffirmed. Johnny's submission and Kate's dominance created a unique and intense bond, one that defined their relationship in every way.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, please share this podcast with your friends and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to visit my website at www.tonyc.info for more content, updates, and exclusive behind-the-scenes insights. This podcast is mainly supported by listeners like you. If you want to help keep the stories coming, consider supporting me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/JTAC. Even just $1 a month makes a huge difference and helps me continue to create the content you love. Thank you again for listening. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, stay safe and keep exploring the unknown.